Hey everyone, welcome to our fantastic planet. In this issue, how to make the Great Lakes. Right now, the Great Lakes are pretty happy. Their names are Superior, the Twins, Michigan and Huron, Erie, and Ontario, and together with their relatives, the smaller lakes, rivers, and wetlands, contain a whopping 20% of the world's surface fresh water. The vastness of the lakes means an intrepid raindrop starting in Superior would have to travel nearly 4,000 kilometers and face many man-made and natural obstacles before finally reaching the Atlantic Ocean. Not only are the Great Lakes massive, but they're also hard workers, supplying over 40 million people with fresh water, powering nearly 5 million homes through hydropower alone, and transporting grain, ore, lumber, and inventions from the American heartland to global sea lanes. But the Great Lakes haven't always been here, which brings us to our question. How do you make the Great Lakes? To make the rocks beneath the Great Lakes, we need to go back a couple thousand million years, to the Precambrian eon, when archaic continents collided and towering mountains were thrown up then slowly eroded away. The ancient foundations of these mountains formed the hard, resilient, metamorphic and igneous rocks, which now lie north of the Great Lakes. Starting 500 million years ago, during the Paleozoic eon, North America was more tropical, and in these primordial oceans, layer upon layer of soft sediments were deposited beneath the waves. Over geologic time, these sediments became the sandstones and limestones which now lie south of the Great Lakes. With the exception of Lake Superior, the contrast between the relatively hard, igneous, and metamorphic rocks to the north and the sedimentary rocks to the south are the reason why the Great Lakes are where they are. 2.5 million years ago, when the glaciers began to bulldoze their way south, the northern rocks resisted the glacial advance, while the southern rocks gave way, allowing the glaciers to carve out deep basins, which would one day be filled by the Great Lakes. The last glaciers reached their maximum about 25,000 years ago. At this time, there were no Great Lakes, only a vast, unbroken, lifeless plain of ice. When a slight change in the Earth's orbit caused the planet to begin to warm, the glaciers began their slow, lurching retreat. Water began to pool in the depressions at the foot of the retreating ice, and by 16,000 years ago, the first Great Lakes had formed. The largest of these early lakes were called Chicago, Saginaw, and Whittlesea, and drained into the Mississippi River. Though they started as murky, iceberg-filled, lifeless ponds, they soon teemed with life as fish, plants, and insects swam from the Mississippi to colonize the Great Lakes. But the glaciers continued their lurching retreat as larger and larger lakes pooled at their foot. By 13,000 years ago, Algonquin, the largest lake to ever occupy the Great Lakes region, had formed and drained directly to the sea, which had flooded all the way to the western shores of Lake Ontario. But the glaciers continued their slow retreat, and by 12,000 years ago, the retreating ice had uncovered a lower drain, and as water began to flow through this lower outlet, Algonquin fell, forming Stanley, Chippewa, and Monong. The Great Lakes were at their lowest point in history, with colossal waterfalls connecting the lakes, and even these dried up during times of extreme drought. However, all was not serene for Stanley, Chippewa, and Monong. Lake Agassiz, a vast lake larger than the whole of the modern Great Lakes combined, loomed to the northwest at the foot of the still retreating ice. Periodically, Agassiz would overflow with biblical effect and flood the Great Lakes. Collectively, these great floods were known as the Manitoba floods and would cause lake levels to rapidly rise over 100 meters before draining away to their previous levels. The last of these floods came about 9,000 years ago, after which time Lake Agassiz floodwaters were able to bypass the Great Lakes. Though the glaciers had completely left the Great Lakes, the massive sheets of ice left a lasting legacy. The load of ice had depressed the land, but now, with the ice gone, the land began its slow, inexorable ascent. Since the land in the north was under glaciers for longer, it had depressed further than the southern land, and so now, with the ice gone, rose faster. It's convenient to think of this process like a giant teeter-totter, with the northern half of the Great Lakes rising while the southern half is falling. Since the drain for the Great Lakes lay in the north of the region, the rising land caused the Great Lakes to rise. By 5,000 years ago, the lakes had reached a new high, forming Lake Nipissing, the forefather of Superior, Michigan, and Huron. But Nipissing was not to last. As the land in the north rose, more southerly drains became dominant, and lake levels fell, as the upper Great Lakes began to drain through Erie and Ontario. The transition from Nipissing to the modern Great Lakes was not a slow, steady decline, but an oscillatory one. Affected by natural climate cycles, lake levels rose and fell several meters over scales ranging from decades to millennia. But the cause, extent, and impact of post-Nipissing lake level fluctuations are the subject of another video, and my master's thesis. Ever since people first arrived in North America over 20,000 years ago, we have influenced the native ecosystems. Though the first people in North America are at least partially responsible for the extinction of the mammoth, American camel, and saber-toothed lion, it was not until European colonization about 300 years ago that the regional landscapes began to change. Settlement by Europeans in the Great Lakes marks the beginning of a population boom, and with the growing population came the need to feed, house, and employ the new residents. Forests were felled to build homes and clear the land for agriculture, while the huge mineral wealth of the Great Lakes was mined to build factories, trains, automobiles, and skyscrapers. However, the creation of these new inventions led to unabated, unregulated industrial expansion and the consequent pollution of the Great Lakes and surrounding ecosystems. The water degraded to a point when, in 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, Ohio caught fire. That's right, things got so bad that a river caught fire. Public outcry following the event helped force the creation of the EPA to combat and regulate industry's blatant disregard for maintaining natural systems. Today, human-caused climate change imperils the Great Lakes. A change in climate will lead to a change in how much rain and snow falls on the lakes, causing lake levels to fluctuate dramatically and unpredictably. This means that today, for the first time in history, human beings have the potential to alter the very shape of the Great Lakes. If you so happen to be a designer of planets, making the Great Lakes is fairly simple. Just add rocks, add glaciers, remove said glaciers, then add people. However, the Great Lakes of yesterday are not the same lakes as today. The extent of the first Great Lakes was carved into the ancient bedrock and structured by the still present glaciers. Though the massive glaciers are long gone, their legacy is still felt beneath the Great Lakes as the land continues to rise and adjust. In the past, natural climate cycles influenced the Great Lakes, but today, man-made climate change interferes with these natural cycles. And so, humanity now threatens to change the very shape of the Great Lakes. We should not expect the Great Lakes of tomorrow to remain as they have always been. But if we are able to adapt to the Great Lakes' dynamic and ever-changing nature, we will build a resilient and sustainable future for ourselves, our children, and the natural world. Hey everyone, Sean here at Fantastic Planet Studios, making videos about the natural history of Earth for you. Thanks for watching this issue. If you've liked what you've seen and want to see more, be sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. But more than anything else, hop on over to Patreon and support us there. Every dollar you donate goes into making more videos for you. Thanks, and until next time, stay curious.